let me kick off actually with the path to mainnet and specifically focus around a few items because they're very much relevant to the incentivized testnet as well. And then we'll go to the goals of the incentivized testnet. I think it's important to talk about them. And then really the open items. I haven't included here the actual spec because it's pretty long. So anyone who wants to can go and read about it in the forum. And in anyhow, most of the spec is not really wasn't really debatable or wasn't really discussed in the feedback. Just a few of the items around the rewards themselves. And so hopefully the path to mainnet blog post reached everyone, and kind of the idea there was to really set up kind of like Vitalik's way of doing that for the Ethereum ecosystem. I thought it's a really great idea to have a kind of a vision towards a certain point in time. Ours, of course, being the mainnet. That's a pretty big thing. The path to mainnet kind of roadmap is of course will be evolving, but at least in terms of the DAO plus development, those are the major things I think in it. So and it's pretty comprehensive, but I wanted to focus on everything that will happen from now all the way to basically the next testnet. And it kind of was the first time we talked about it officially, but there is need to have at least one, probably two new testnets. Usually that means that there's some piece of the code which is not backwards compatible, or it doesn't make sense to do a hard fork and have all of that legacy behind. It's much better to just cut and start new. And really the kind of the points around the next testnet will be the second version of the contracts, the smart contracts. Up until now, the smart contracts, as you guys know them, were pretty simple, and they simply just were registry for validators and operators. Basically, anyone who registered a validator, anyone who registered an operator passed through some very simplified smart contract. And that was really a placeholder. The next big evolution of that will be alongside the registry of operators and validators. A big chunk will be dedicated to the idea of the token living between the validators and the operators, mainly through fees. And so, of course, that's something we always talked about. Operators charge fee, validators pay that fee. But it took a lot of engineering to get that right in terms of usability, especially because of the high gas fees. We're still working around that, but the big advancement in contracts V2 is really that piece of software. Basically, the idea that you'll have a validator coming up and depositing or using SSV within the protocol as fees, and how those fees are transferred to operators, how operators can set up those fees. And on top of that, we actually have some pretty crazy UI web app to actually have dashboards both for the operators and the validators in respect to the fee earned, when they can withdraw that fee, and so on and so forth. And so that really, and Ariel is here, he led the charge on that. And I actually referenced, I don't know if anyone looked at it, but I referenced the spec for contracts V2 in the Path to Roadmap blog post. And so if you have an hour, go and read it. It's actually very, very interesting, the way we decided to approach it. But that's going to be a major milestone. It basically means the entire, I would say, or most of the token model will be in contracts V2. And the reason why we do a new testnet for that is because otherwise we would have needed to migrate all of that, like literally all of the registries from the old contract to the new contract, because the contracts are completely different. You can't really do a simple update like you do with an updatable contract. And so we simply decided to reset. Now, why am I kind of mentioning that in the scope of incentivized testnet? Because that will happen hopefully before the incentivized testnet ends. And so what it will mean is that we will somehow need to transition. First, let the community know very well, the operators know very well, but somehow transition to distributing rewards based on the new testnet instead of the old one once that reaches in. And so I wanted to start with that because that's a pretty important thing to take into considerations. At the end of the day, we are developing the protocol, and so it's important to have the eyes on the goal. And so yeah, that's a pretty significant consideration to have. It doesn't really affect the incentivized testnet structure, but it is something which is worth considering. Anyone got a chance to read the full path to mainnet? No, Ford, yeah, Ben, yeah. Awesome. So any thoughts on that? I mean, it's not really, too weird to do that. I mean, Ethereum did it a few times with their testnet, but any thoughts on that, anyone?
It sounds solid to me and gives us actually a chance. I'm wondering whether it's going to be live to use the structure around verified operators that's being discussed in the forums. Yeah,
so the structure for verified operators will be in place, but it's not going to be DAO activated. It will only be DAO voted on. So one of the future versions of the contracts for SSV will include the actual admin for the contracts to mark which operators are verified, and of course the admin is the multi-sig committee. So the idea was to have some operator getting voted on, and then the multi-sig committee being the one executing and marking that operator as verified. And Yurik, I think you had a suggestion which I like, and I thought about it as well, is to have a similar, a tiered approach to being verified. That's more into the mainnet, I guess, discussions, but to have a tiered approach to verifying operators, where a new operator, depending on I would say the risk or how well positioned that operator is, can get some higher or lower limitations on the amount of validators they have. And then, of course, when time goes by and that operator performs well, the DAO can increase that allowance or that allocation. I saw that a lot in Lido as well. I saw it in Aave. So it's nothing new, but I definitely like that approach as well.
Yeah, it's a good approach. I think we can definitely use that. I mean, to some degree, number of validators is determined by the stakers, because this isn't assigned centrally, right? They choose who they go with, but at the same time, having some limit, I think, is very, very sane.
Yeah. And actually, that brings it to another point I forgot to put in the actual presentation, but limiting nodes to a certain number of shares is something we definitely need to do. And so the idea will be that you'll have an operator. When you verify an operator, you actually verify an Ethereum account. And under that account, the operator can set up multiple nodes. So you can think about it as another point of decentralization or diversification. So you'll have, if you want to be a very, very prominent operator, you can have multiple data centers located in different parts of the world, in different cloud services, running different beacon nodes, and then people can choose. So which is a bit different than what we have today, where an actual operator is verified for a specific private key for a specific node. In the future,
That raises a really good question. So I'm looking at how some pools are doing this. And their requirement is that an operator run no more than 1,000 keys, and that each additional node is in its own container infrastructure and in a separate region.
Yeah, that's something, again, I don't think that DAO can really enforce it, but it's definitely something that DAO can make the operator commit to. And then, and I think most operators will do, by the way. I think that with SSV, you can get the power of actually distributing the infrastructure.
I would quibble a little bit on the DAO can't enforce it. They sort of can, because right now in the proposal it says the DAO can vote to remove an operator from verified status.
Oh yeah. What I meant was the DAO can't really, by force, I mean not like it prevents somebody from cheating, right? If somebody cheats,
they can't prevent them from cheating. Yeah, but if they get caught, then so it's risky.
Exactly.
It's very risky.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's something which is interesting. We'll see the start of it in a very rudimentary way for the incentivized testnet, because we don't want people running more than 2,000 shares on a node. And so what we'll do is simply have operators which will limit operators to 2,000 shares. And then once they reach it, they can simply spin up another operator, give it another name, and continue serving the community. And so yeah, that's an important part as well. Awesome. Right. So I won't focus too much on that, but other than the contracts themselves, what we want to do until the new testnet is really hit three main points. One is completely refactor the networking layer for QBFT or for SSV, sorry. Do it from the ground up with a formal spec, and then adapt it to everything we've learned the past 8 months. There's a lot of changes we want to do. A different network topography needs to be adopted, and so on and so forth. Amir from the team is the one leading the charge. It will take some time, but that's a big chunk of or a big project we'll already start working on and continue working through the next months. Message processing, a completely revamp of the way the node manages internal messages coming from the network. It mostly due to optimizations. One of the reasons why you see on your dashboards, the node dashboards, you see the go routines count is because every validator spins their own bunch of node go routines, basically new threads, and that's not very efficient. And so message processing will be completely refactored, will lower down significantly the number of go routines. That will lower CPU, that will lower RAM resources, and so on. So that's another major thing. And the third, and that's going to be charged by Neve from the team. And the third piece of the puzzle is that we're working with Roberto from Consensus. He's the guy actually behind QBFT, which is the consensus protocol for SSV. A really smart guy. And one of the things we want to do is align our QBFT implementation completely to the formal spec and the formal verified spec for QBFT. That's a major thing. There are slight differences between what we have today and what the formal spec is, but just in terms of preparation for an audit, that's something we need to do. So that's kind of the third big thing, and the fourth being the contracts. And so that's really kind of the major milestone in terms of development. And yeah, I mean, any comments around that, guys?
Yeah, I think that all sounds good, and I don't think should be a problem with having to restart. I mean, I think I can't speak for the operator side, but I think for the people running validators, it should just be as simple as uploading the key store files again, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Tiago, you wanted to comment on something?
No, I just agree. I was just about to ask if those changes, those refactoring will happen before mainnet or after mainnet.
Oh yeah. All the path to mainnet is, as the name suggests, is the path to mainnet. So everything we've talked about and actually more is all of the things that need to happen before mainnet readiness, basically. So everything we spoke about, and Elan, maybe you can link the path to mainnet blog post. I think that some missed it, but
link
all of that, the path to mainnet blog post.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, all of that will happen before mainnet. Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. So I guess to the main event. So the incentivized testnet. The incentivized testnet is really the moment where we introduce rewards to the testnet for a number of reasons. One of which is, of course, to reward the community. There's a lot of people putting a lot of work and time and actually hard-earned cash to maintain nodes and maintain the entire resource set they need in order to operate a node. And so the incentivized testnet really, I think, should be focused on rewarding those type of users and people from the community. That's important. And I think it's not just important for the next 4 months. I think it's important for a much longer duration. I like the idea of what Polkadot did, where they took the testnet and put rewards into it to make it serious and make it very similar to a mainnet environment. Ethereum didn't do that because Ethereum is big enough. So there's enough people considering the testnet to be serious to maintain it as such. But definitely other blockchains, there's a stark difference between the testnet and the mainnet. And I think for developers and SSV network being at the end of the day a developer platform, I think it's important to have a very similar look and feel. And so we're kicking off with a 4-month incentivized testnet, but there's definitely a lot of reasons why to do a much longer one. And so one of the primary reasons why is to just give back to those type of community members. The second one is a much more programmatic one, or much more I would say a technical one. In testnet usually, and that's actually in all testnets, there's a separation between the economical responsibility of running a piece of software or choosing how you want to run that piece of software, and the actual efficiency or results of running that. Best case in point being, again, the Ethereum Beacon chain, testnet Beacon chain, the Praetor chain. It's and that's like probably the best testnet working in the space currently, again, because it's Ethereum. Its efficiency, effectiveness, and so on are much lower than mainnet for obvious reasons. Why, of course, there's no stake in play, right? It's just funny money. But nonetheless, it's very important to, especially within SSV, to connect that relationship, because at the end of the day, SSV in mainnet will look something like that. Somebody will come to the network. Might it be a developer? Might it be an individual? Whatever the setup is, they will have to choose their operators. And of course, once it's real money, real ETH, they will very much closely look into the performance of those validators. Something which is very hard to mimic in a testnet with funny money or test tokens. And so the idea behind introducing real rewards is that you'll create that relationship between validators and their operators. Validators will choose operators based on their performance because they want to earn rewards, and they will be very vocal when something goes wrong because they will lose those rewards. And on the other hand, operators will have a lot of incentives to be at the peak of their game, because otherwise they won't get anything, and of course their validators won't get anything, which is bad as well. And so that relationship and accountability is very hard to get without real money and without real tokens. And so that's a main goal to the incentivized testnet. If we can create that relationship and educate people on how SSV looks like when real tokens are in consideration, I think it will be much easier to transition to mainnet than introducing that relationship out of the blue with a turn of a switch on mainnet. And so I think that's a very important goal to have in mind. And incentivizing the testnet is, I think, hits that goal. And then there's two other goals, which one is debatable and one is nice to have. One of the discussions we have, and Fod, you we both talked about it in private, but also you commented on the forum, is that there's an opportunity to use the incentivized testnet with a bigger reward to actually not just fulfill those two primary goals, but also create growth, both for the community, the token, and the testnet itself. And that's really a function of how much tokens you distribute, right? And so that's something we need to decide as a community if we want to do that. My kind of opinion is kind of split. I like it from the one hand. On the other hand, I saw a lot of projects which had a lot of issues with when distributing large amounts of tokens. And so I'm kind of split in the middle, but I definitely see the appeal in that. I think that, you know, at the end of the day, we want to increase the amount of people hearing about the project, using the testnet, building on top of SSV. And so that can be definitely used for that. And I would love to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to hear more opinions on it too. I mean, I wrote that post on the forum, and obviously we've been talking about it, but there are a lot of assumptions in all of this. And one is just like whether we want this to be a marketing program to begin with, or just focus on, creating the best testnet we can to help the development. And then also like whether, adding these incentives will attract people and to what degree. And then also, trying to quantify the risk, like you said, like, there have been other examples, it seems like, where there have been negative effects or sell pressure has been created. So, and yeah, I'm for it personally. My evaluation of all that stuff is that it will be worthwhile, but I'm only one person, and I'd like to hear more.
I think it's a good idea. We've seen engagement already, more maybe from the staker community, but I think also from people running nodes, right? You get the kind of, I want to say this clearly, but at the same time, be clear that I'm not dissing anyone. You get the kind of people running nodes that you would not normally expect to want to run nodes. And what I mean by that is they are at the very bottom of the learning curve, and they're bravely climbing it all the way to the top to run a successful node, never having done that before, right? I think that speaks to there is an incentive there to do it, and it's probably more than love of tech.
I agree. Okay.
So is that for or against a very big reward set? Because
that
at the end of the day,
for a reward set. I'm not sure about size, but for a reward set, because I think it's good to have more people engaged in it.
Yeah,
I think
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement that we need the rewards should be in place. Now the question is how big, right? I mean, the bigger it is, of course, it will attract more people, and which is of course always a good thing. But it will definitely have negative effects down the road. Now the question is, are those negative effects worth it, right? I mean, that's I guess the big question.
I would say you definitely want to attract all kinds of people, not only highly specialized, trained staking providers with years of experience. Like you guys have probably seen blockchain experts with over 15 years of experience. We don't want that. So if there is a very good tool for measuring the performance, I don't mind seeing newcomers at the bottom of the learning curve climbing it up really quick and becoming very good operators with good performance, with proven track record at least during the testnet, right? That I think that shouldn't be a showstopper. So the criteria for sharing those rewards should be very well specified, and should be very, very important at the time of sharing the rewards, based on performance, not just on participating.
Yeah. So
that should probably balance things.
Yeah. So maybe to give a bit of context to that, so from the big pie of reward and whatever the amount of reward is, some of that goes to operators and some of that goes to validators because you want to incentivize both groups. Now, Within the operators, we have verified and non-verified. Each have different allocations. Of course, verified operators earn more. In the validator side, you'll have a big chunk of the reward, at least in the current spec, a big chunk of the reward goes to SSV holders, which also register validators, with the idea that if you're both SSV holder and you register validators, you get more reward, significantly more reward. And a smaller chunk will go to just random people registering validators, which not necessarily hold SSV rewards. I think that by increasing significantly the reward pool, you more than proportionally incentivize people to get SSV, register some validators, and get SSV as a rewards. And my worry is what happens next, right? What happens after this incentivized testnet ends? Because at the end of the day, you create inflation. And so, from my opinion, the negative effect will be, of course, people just getting free tokens and what they do with them later on. On the other hand, you can always make the argument, which I think FOD is making, that at the first place, somebody had to buy those tokens, stake them, register a validator, find 32 test tokens, somehow get into the Launchpad CLI, register a validator, and so on and so forth. And so it's not just random people. It's actually people who did one or two things to get to that point. And so it's not necessarily a bad idea to give them free tokens because they did the work.
And also, it sounds like the incentivization won't totally go away after these 4 months if the intention is to keep the testnet running, or eventually on mainnet launch, if there's some type of staking mechanism that's designed. Hopefully there should be enough of a force to kind of maintain a reason to hold SSV beyond just trying to participate in the governance and hoping that the price goes up from the just the growth. But yeah, there definitely will be, we would be artificially inflating it. So at the end, that's just the difference between where we're inflating it to for this versus where the long term might end up.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
What is approximate projection of how many operators will the network need in the mainnet? So what are your projections?
So need is a very difficult thing to answer. I think that the bigger the amount of verified operators you have, the bigger the choice users have. And then the question is, how will those users choose which operators, right? So it's basically kind of a free market approach, right? I mean, it's the same as asking how many staking services there are today and how people choose those staking services. And so I would imagine that the bigger the better operators will get traction. Of course, the staking services with the big names, which are well known, will get some traction. And so it's going to be a mix. It's going to be definitely a mix. And in terms of the numbers, like I think one of the really good reference points would be Chainlink, to tell the truth. Chainlink, I think, has approximately 100 operators today, and they are a very successful type of network. And I think that's, of course, I don't imagine we'll launch with 100, but I think an SSV network with 100 operators, which all perform well, is an incredibly powerful tool.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And any other thoughts on kind of the reward size and everything? James, I don't know if you're following us, but I'd love your take. You guys are running one of the biggest communities out there. What do you think, at least from your point of view, the right approach here? James, I think you're on mute. We'll give it another second. I think he has some there. Right. So, I think if James manages to get back to us, maybe I'd love to hear your thoughts. But anyone else about this type of kind of, I guess, crossroads we need to pass?
I have a quick question about verified operators.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to limit the amount of nodes an operator can run on a single verified account? And would it make sense to do so, thinking about decentralization and such?
Yeah, we actually spoke about it at the beginning. Definitely. I think that one of the things the verified operators framework will need to have is a tiered approach where the part of the I get quote unquote listing process for a verified operator will be to assess how much allocation of shares they can have. So if it's a very small staking service, maybe they'll get a smaller allocation, and as time goes, they will get bigger and bigger. If it's a bigger staking service with a proven track record, let's say some staking service which already runs thousands of validators in Mainnet outside of SSV, then of course that number will be different. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's something we need to do.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
So overall, I would say that I agree. I know it was a topic of debate of whether you should have SSV tokens or not as part of the validator requirement. I'm also looking at for my as an operator, as a verified operator, I don't have very many validators. I have less than probably 100 on my node at the moment. And when I'm comparing against other operators, I see that they have over 100 or sometimes I think over 1,000 or so. And I know that we don't want to have people getting a lot of geth and then creating a lot of new validators just for the testnet and just to get additional rewards. And I guess I'm just wondering, is that something that I should be concerned about, is having a lower number of validators? And is that going to hinder me at all in some way? Not that I'm really interested in starting a new validator each day. That's not really going to help me get up to a large number or anything like that. So just curious about your thoughts on that.
I think the approach should be that the bigger operators should earn more. I think it's also difficult to run a bigger operator. The question is how much more. For now, the specs talks about the linear relationship between the number of validators you have and the rewards you have. So what it basically means is that somebody who has 100 validators will earn 1/10 of what some operator earns with 1,000 validators, considering their performance is the same. And so one of the things I actually talked with Lansky from Depnodes and also FOD is to actually have a logarithmic function for it. So where, between say 0 and 100 validators per operator, you'll have a very rapid increase in the amount of rewards you get. But after that point, it really shallows down or really tempers down. And so the much bigger operators, the ones with 1,000 or even close to 2,000 validators, will still earn more. But after that amount, let's say 100, they will earn much less for each validator. Of course, that reduces their overall rewards, but it does kind of, I guess, equalizes the playing field in some way. But you still want to have the incentives in place to actually make operators want to get more validators, of course.
Of course. Thank you.
Awesome, guys. So we don't have any, I guess, real decisions here in terms of the size of the rewards. But that's something we'll definitely need to decide as soon as possible, because that leads me to really the open items before the incentivized testnet can begin. And so technically, the incentivized testnet can start. The nodes are running pretty well. There's a lot of very stable validators, a lot of very stable operators, and a way to measure them. The score system on the Explorer, I think, works well, unless we have some unknown issues. And so we have all of that in place. Really, the open items are around the spec. So we've talked about it, the total distribution amount, how much rewards we want to actually reward the entire testnet. The higher the amount is, the more people outside of our immediate community will join in, which is a good thing, but obviously has some effects going forward. Distribution allocation, specifically operators back to 50%. There was some pushback because we lowered the percentage of allocated rewards to operators and gave more to the SSV SSV holders, which register validators. And the pushback was why it went down from 50% to 35%, I think. And so I'm actually for to bringing that back to 50%. So have 50% to operators, 50% to validators, and split it into the middle. I think that's a good approach. And so that's an open item we still need to fix, but I think generally we have consensus around that. We still have a few missing parts in terms of we have Ariel is leading that. We have a simulation built. It's not fully ready yet, but hopefully in the next few days, a simulation for, let's say, the past two weeks of the testnet, right? So you'll have a simulation where you'll see address by address exactly how much rewards they will get during those 2 weeks and so on. I think it's important to give that and upload that to the community so people can check and see for themselves how it works. So that's still missing. And we have a calculator coming up, which is still missing. And there will be the Explorer will have a section built into it for each operator and each validator if they're eligible or not for the for each distribution. So if you're an operator and you drop below whatever the score is, you'll see yourself in the Explorer as non-eligible, and you'll have to fix that. So those are the three things missing from that, and it's pretty close to finishing. And the fourth thing is distribution. There's a lot of cost associated with having 8 different distributions, because people will have to actually somehow withdraw the tokens to their own wallet. And so one of the things we're working on is calculating how much each distribution will cost in terms of fees, and maybe considering having still eight calculation points, but 1 distribution point. So still being measured 8 times during the incentivized testnet as the spec suggested, but not having 8 different distributions, simply having 1 at the end to consolidate all of 8 of them to save on gas fees. So again, Ariel will post on that and see what we should do, because we don't want to get to a point where it's very costly to withdraw your rewards, right? I mean, that will simply make people not withdraw them. And the ultimate thing is really what the start date is. Currently, it's in the spec. It's set to January 12th. I don't know if we can hit that, but in any case, we need to set up a start date. So really, those are the open items. Far, do you have anything else?
No, I mean, I think that all sounds good. Yeah, the biggest thing, like you said, just the decisions that need to be made, and I'd like to get more opinions on that, I guess, or get as many opinions as we can.
Yeah. Any thoughts here, guys?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. So first of all, is there a mechanism which basically evaluation of performance? So is there a mechanism which can actually determine what if the operator is running local ETH1 and ETH2 nodes?
No.
Yeah,
there's nothing. Yeah.
So that's a problem, right? So because obviously, if you declare an incentivized testnet, there will be quite a significant influx of. So what we have seen in other testnets, especially of multi-accounts coming in. So basically, there are entities which have lots of access to a lot of KYC, basically, obviously access to a lot of passports, right? And they will do multi accounts and obviously accumulate the tokens you will distribute, right? So if there is obviously you cannot really protect against it. However, if there is some kind of mechanism we can implement, because like deploying actual local nodes, it's quite harder than just pointing SSV to the Infura, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, if this somehow can be enforced, right, you will limit the amount of bad actors getting the tokens.
So actually, if we allocate a lot of the validator rewards to SSV holders, then it's going to be much harder to, to just manipulate and set up a lot of validators, because you'll actually have to have SSV tokens. On the operator's side, you still need people to choose you, right? So if you simply run a bunch of operators and nobody chooses you as a validator, then you earn nothing. Or if you spin up a lot of operators, but they're not performing well, you won't be eligible. So I think in that regard, it's going to be fine. Again, there's always the manual intervention, right? If somebody sees some manipulation happening or some dishonest actor, they can always point it out, and we can manually exclude them from the incentivized testnet.
So I think the good question here is, right, when you look at the SSV node, the bulk of the cost is actually in the consensus and execution clients, particularly in the execution client. It's not in the SSV node itself. So there's an incentive for a node operator to say, I'm verified, I'm running my own, and lie about it. Just a monetary incentive, right? So I'm wondering whether there could be a way to detect that, to say, well, you're actually, going to a public RPC in some way. Yeah.
Nothing comes to mind, but there might be soft ways to combat that. Maybe, and I'll be more than happy to facilitate, is that to actually give room and give the stage for operators which do run their own infrastructure, do run minority clients and so on. And so maybe give them more visibility into the network and into the community, and in that way offset that difference. I think in the end of the day, the high quality operators will win, like they do in shitty operators don't last a long time, and I think most of them are running their own infrastructure. But if you guys have any thoughts around that, and that's something like, that's a bigger, I think, issue than SSV, like having a lot of different staking services using Infura. That's bad for Ethereum. It's not just bad for SSV.
So for Ethereum, it gets resolved eventually with proof of custody, but that's, years out at this point. You could say the same for SSV, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if working with Infura becomes problematic for the kind of the regular validator client, it will be the same with SSV. So you'll have to run your own infrastructure. You'll have to run and have a database full of a bunch of data in order to sign proof of custody. And then if somebody asks you for the proof itself, you'll have to serve it and so on. So you'll have to eventually run. You'll have to eventually run something. Yeah, and even with merge, I think there's going to be a great incentive to run your own, just because of the additional rewards coming in.
Yeah.
And if you're pointing at Infura, then the good question is, okay, so where do the transaction rewards go? Where does MEV go, right? Infura is in the RPC business. They're not in the mining business. So they're not going to bring that back to people, most likely.
In general, I think that the technology stack for running an Ethereum validator is going to be one of the more complicated ones in the entire space, because if you think about it, you'll have ultimately, right, you'll have a Bitcoin node, you'll have an execution node, you'll have some kind of a validator client, you'll have SSV nodes, and you'll also have some MEV solution bolted into it. So it's a pretty complicated tech stack. And so all of that really leads to a point where you'll have to have specialized service providers, because it's going to be just too costly to run it on your own. And then at that point, the only thing that can save us from this centralization is SSV, because if it's going to be Sorry?
Yeah, I'll quibble on too expensive to run it on your own.
I think it's going to be very expensive. Like, imagine that, I don't know,
We'll see.
like, I think that the Bitcoin node today costs, what, like $500 with a bit of backups a month on a cloud service, right?
No,
more than that?
No, less than that. It depends on the cloud service you choose. This is not an SSV discussion. We can take that elsewhere. But you're talking about the most expensive way to do that. People are running this for $50. People are running this for people are running this for $50 a month in the cloud successfully.
That's great for them. Add execution client and SSV. I think it's going to
be with everything, with execution consensus.
Are you people, Thorsten? Are you people?
I actually pay $140 a month, but I did try the $50 a month as well at one point, just for giggles.
And what was the result?
It worked well for what it was, So I'm a little bit more professional at. Well, that's for solo staking, right? I've got one validator, I got two validators. So in my case, of course, I'm paying more now because I'm a professional node operator. But I think we're going to be fine with individual stakers still running their own stuff.
Yeah, my worry is that MEV is going to really change the game for individuals, depending on how it's going to be implemented.
I'm actually going to hopefully, fingers crossed, to get a grant to put that implementation into ETH-Docker. And right now it looks as if it's going to be really lightweight because of the proposer builder separation. Builders are going to be buku big, dedicated hardware with 32 cores and maybe a GPU and crazy, right?
Yeah.
But proposers don't need anything like that.
We'll see. I'm actually not that optimistic around when it's going to be deployed. That's really kind of side chat from what we started from. But
we're getting down the rabbit hole here. I love this stuff, but it's not SSV, right? So
I'm less optimistic than you for the individual staker. I think it's going to be, it's probably going to be like individual miners at the end of the day. You could do that. Maybe you earn some money, but you won't be able to compete for long. But it's not to say that the future is bloom for decentralization. I think there are.
I'm really hoping I will see you at some point in person. How about we see how that works out, and we take a snapshot.
I'll buy you.
We'll take a snapshot next year, this day, and then either one of us buys the other a beer.
Yeah, but
depending on whether solo stakers are still viable.
We first need to decide what the parameters are. But I'm more than happy about it. I'm more than happy to do that. It's a win-win for me, because if I win, I'm getting a beer. If I lose, at least Ethereum stays decentralized in a higher degree. Cool. So going back to the Incentivized Testnet. So I'm less worried about manipulation and dishonest use than I was before. I think that it's going to be very hard to be dishonest as an operator, because you still need people to choose you as a validator. And if you try to just spin 1,000 validators, it's going to be very easy to spot it. And so you'll be excluded. And once we introduce SSV holders to the mix and giving them most of the validator rewards, it's going to be very hard to manipulate there, because you'll actually need to buy SSV tokens. And so that's going to be very hard to manipulate with. That's going to be.
Guys, do we need a dry run in a way? Can we get it first time right? I mean, I was looking at the calculator, and I know we had a lot of discussions. So are we sure that it will work like from day one? Because I can see, the community of operators and validators go crazy if we detect like an issue after the first round of distribution. Yeah. And second, I guess it would give us a chance to like lock the period in a way, then have a 2 weeks dry run sort of, and then just do a little recap on if this is somehow what we expected, and let it roll after that. So maybe something like this.
We'll definitely do a dry run for the kind of calculating who is eligible and for what, and then post it to the community and people can check it out. In terms of the actual start of the testnet, it's one of the first things I wrote in the original post. This is still a development environment. If something happens and we're not sure about, or if we have some downtime or whatever the reason is, people need to be patient with that. So you can always say, you know what, guys, the last 2 weeks weren't good. We are not distributing anything, and we simply choose, pushing everything 2 weeks into the future. Like we'll start another distribution and exclude that one. And I think that's it's okay. We're still in development phase. I know people are antsy when it comes to their rewards, but what we'll as kind of the core community will have to be strong and say, you know what, guys, this is still in development. Something happened, and we'll distribute it in another distribution instead of this one or whatever we choose. Or maybe you can always say, you know what, the last 2 weeks weren't very good. We'll distribute to everyone. You can choose whatever you want to do, but people will have to be patient. It's not Mainnet. If it was Mainnet, it's a whole different story.
I agree. It's just that we should catch like the big ones, before we before we stop the distributions in a way, because as you said, of course it's development, but you know how that goes. People will start, they will go crazy if we gonna fine tune in a way the rewards, even if it's for the best of the network. It might look like something we shouldn't do. You know what I think that I think that transparency here is important. I think that we need to get not a simulation, it's really a dry run, like have a CSV with all of the addresses, with the amount of SSV they would have gotten if these incentivized testnet would have started, and then anyone can go check everything's okay. If not, they can tell us, and then we can be sure that the script running and calculating the rewards is working well. And again, you can always manually intervene. If somebody comes and says, you know what, the script told that I should get 10 SSVs and I should get 15, and this is why, they can always approach one of the ambassadors or one of the blocks team guys and explain their case. And if it makes sense, we'll simply change it manually. That's fine as well. It's good.
Awesome. There's a lot of operators here in the call, so I guess if there's no more questions, it's pretty well thought out in terms of the spec, and people are kind of aligned with what's going to happen. Paul, do you want to say something?
Yeah, is anyone against raising the reward significantly? Because it seemed like there's a little bit of positive thoughts on it, but just for the purpose of playing devil's advocate.
Let's also state how much we're talking about. So the current rewards are 64,000 SSV tokens spread during 4 months. And the idea was to double or to 128,000 or even quadruple to 320,000 SSV tokens during those 4 months. And of course, the bigger it is, the more incentive it goes. So let's say anyone against raising it from 64,000 to 320,000? That's, I guess, the question.
Okay, yeah. It sounds like that decision is kind of made then, or at least that amount. But is anyone against raising it further? I guess the main risk is having some kind of self-pressure that results from this. But yeah, I kind of wanted to hear more other sides of the table on that. But if no one's that concerned, then it seems like we have consensus. I don't know.
I'm not against raising it, but I think the log function you talked about that boosts incentives for small operators is important. And I really hope it makes it in the testnet.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Awesome, guys. So if anyone has any thoughts after this call, we have the forum discussion there. Please feel free to post whatever you want and comment, and hopefully we can wrap it up quickly and start the incentivized test. Awesome. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you, Alon.
Yeah, sounds great. It's all very exciting.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great holidays.
Yeah, have a great
Thank
year.
you.
Happy holidays.
Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Successful SSV year.
All right.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.